traits that would be needed when treating human cancer patients.
Every dog's cancer is a little bit different from every other. And that's what makes dogs an especially valuable research model when you're trying to develop a technology that predicts which individual cancers are going to.
Welcome to the Author's Edge radio show with Gael Freer and Bob Price. Now, their show airs nationwide on the My Genre Radio Network, Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. Each week on their show, they help authors create books that transform our lives and imaginations. Through radio excellence, they create a unique community resource, one that promotes, connects, and fosters a sense of well-being. Gael and Bob maintain a focus on sharing books, publishing, marketing, and writing solutions. They serve listeners by providing outlets for their creative skills and energies, and they help them flourish in the competitive marketplace. Their weekly show provides intros, writing spotlights, helps you in promoting your book, your writing, your publishing, your marketing tidbits, and much more. Okay, audience, here's Gael and Bob.
Welcome to the Author's Edge, and today I am flying solo. My wonderful co-host, Bob Price, is a bit under the weather, and so today I'm all by my little lonesome, except for the gentleman to my right, my left. I know, as growing up, I could never get it right. My mother would send me to get something out of a closet or something, and she would say, "Now, Gael, it's on your left." And then I would go up and I would look in the closet and I would say, "Okay, which side is the left?" And I inevitably got it wrong every single time. So I would like to introduce you to E.E. Arundel. And he is an author and storyteller from the Missouri Ozarks. E.E. is a lifelong student of mythology, archaeology, and a lover of the night sky. With a degree in journalism and a background as a reporter, E.E. has traveled to over 50 countries, including a decade of living and working in Eastern Europe and 49 states. Twinkle, the Star Mouse, is E.E.'s first published work. Welcome, E.E. Arundel.
Thank you, Gael. It's terrific to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that.
Even if you didn't know I was on your left. So, yeah.
Oh, you're on my left. I used to put my fingers up in front of me like this, and I would say to my mother, "So which one is the left?" No, never mind. So tell me, what was it like? Tell us a little bit about your background as a journalist, first off.
Well, my background as a journalist is actually reasonably brief, so that can be so. So I originally, back in the 90s, went to Eastern Europe as part of a democracy building program. There was a lot going on in Eastern Europe after the wall came down and the governments were changing. So the U.S. Department of State, along with National Public Radio, invested in some young journalists to go over there and kind of make their mark, and was over there to introduce a National Public Radio style model in Hungary and help establish the American Journalism Center. And then I worked in Yugoslavia for a little while as a correspondent there, and then just got tired of being broke and needing money all the time, which commonly happens to reporters. And it was a great time to be in Eastern Europe because there were a lot of Western companies coming over into that area at the time, and ended up working in a variety of different businesses, primarily in media, which was my background, and in Hungary and Poland and Romania primarily. But I never stopped writing, even though, and even did a little bit of journalism work while I was in Romania. So
what was it like living in Eastern Europe at that time? I mean, I'd be fascinated.
Being a young American in my 20s in the 90s in Budapest and Warsaw and Prague and Bucharest was heaven.
Really?
Yeah, it was one big adventure. It was like, and those societies were going through extraordinarily dramatic changes at the time, and they still are going through a lot of very transformative changes. But this was before they were in NATO, before they were part of the European Union. And these countries and the populations were very much trying to figure out, what it meant to live in a free society, what it meant to live in the West. So it was a fascinating time to be there, and I could tell stories all day about the things.
Well,
but
tell
I
us something
was there
fun.
Something fun.
That you can actually tell.
Well,
I
did meet my wife over there. So yeah, that was fun. My wife is Hungarian, but she's what they call an Erdély Magyar, which means she's from Transylvania. So she's from West Central Romania. So raised 2 kids in Poplar Bluff, Missouri, who are half Transylvanian, which is a great benefit at Halloween. So they always knew how to dress, and so they enjoyed it. But yeah, no, lots of great adventures over there, and I think just anytime you are forced into a situation where you have to adapt to everybody else, and what's going on there, it teaches you a lot. It teaches you a lot about life. It teaches you a lot about business, and
it teaches you a lot about yourself.
Yeah, and it taught me, for example, I'm terrible with languages, and I do speak some Hungarian and some Romanian, but very poorly, and I've one of the.
Thank goodness Gabby speaks English.
Yes,
right?
yeah. My wife, she speaks English very well, and the dogs are Hungarian Vizslas, so they speak Hungarian, and the kids speak Hungarian. So, yeah.
And you're left out in the cold.
Yeah, so if I get yelled at, it's usually in Hungarian. So, yeah.
And do you understand?
Yeah, you do. The first thing you learn in any country is the profanity. So I usually understand when people are angry with me. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So you've also been to 49 states.
Yeah, that dang Hawaii. And I've got a couple of territories in there too, but I got to get out to Hawaii. That's my excuse to go to Hawaii. I just haven't made the time.
Gotten to Hawaii. I've been to Hawaii.
Yeah.
It's a nice place.
So,
so then tell us about Twinkle the Star Mouse.
Yeah. So I think for the last I stopped professionally writing or getting paid to write, in my 20s, and I'm in my 50s now. So, but for the last 30 years, I write for myself, and so I never stopped writing. And I think everybody needs a creative outlet in their life, and I'm tone deaf and can't draw, so I'm naturally attracted to writing. I have a sister who's a musician, so that makes it doubly tough. But I think writing is a fantastic way to be creative. And professionally now I work in animal health, and I'm part of several different businesses in animal health, and I do a lot of work all over the country and in software and operations and different things. And those are fantastic creative endeavors to create business and be involved in business, but also is what you're doing to pay the bills, and what you're doing to make money, and to do something where you're sort of creating for yourself is really fun. So, I think over the last 30 years, I've accumulated a lot of files of manuscripts that I've started that I haven't finished, of ideas and drawers full of things that I can do. And, about a year and a half ago, decided, let me try to bring one of these to fruition finally. And so decided that because I had some help from you and you knew some great artists, and I did work in advertising for a number of years, and know how, I think, to communicate and work with artists and creative people. And it was also a time management thing for me, that I had this manuscript that I really pounded into shape. And I'll say this about writing a children's book, is I think it's on version 30, the manuscript. So, and it becomes, a background in journalism kind of helps, because you have to be very concise, and you do just boil the copy down. And once you start working with the artists in a children's book, you realize there's things that you have in there that you don't need anymore, because you don't need descriptors in there, because people can look at the pictures. Absolutely. And you can boil it down even further. So creating a children's book it was a lot more work over the last year and a half than I thought it would be.
But in some ways, it's also a little bit simpler too, because with the illustrations, sometimes there are words that can be taken out. You can simplify the language a little
100%. Bit. You have to.
Yeah,
you have to, because I don't think you don't need to say what kids can see,
right,
in the illustrations, and that's where And the other thing you learn as a journalist, as a reporter, you don't have pride of authorship. You let other people cut you down. You let other people
Yes.
edit your copy and move things around, and that makes things better.
Yes. What's the essence of Twinkle's message? I mean, let's take a look at the book. Let me have the book there.
Sure.
Yeah. We have a copy of it right here for everybody.
Yeah, the book is right now. We're getting ready to self-publish
Yes.
and begin to promote the book.
See, here we go.
And so
Everybody can see it.
You have it there in a
beautifully
in a
illustrated.
proof, and
Yes.
and we're going to get it in a larger format proof
Yeah.
because the illustrations deserve a larger format. I could
Yeah.
talk about the things I've begun to learn about self-publishing recently. That could be a total, and I'm
That's
just
a whole
yeah.
other issue. And
it is, and I'm just starting that journey.
Yes.
And it's super interesting, and I've learned some things, but goodness knows I haven't learned a lot. So we just really finished up the artwork last month,
Mhm.
and have finished tweaking the layout 2 weeks ago.
Right.
So we're very much at the precipice of putting the book out onto KDP essentially, and then looking at some other self-publishers, or looking at an offset print run that would cost a little bit more. But the essence of Twinkle is the night sky.
Okay. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So Twinkle is really a story that grew out of, I think one of my most joyous points in life was reading to my kids.
That's where I wanted you to go.
Yeah. So I think if you sit down and you read to your kids every night, and it's a fantastic thing to do. And it does work for people that are at that point with their kids. I can only encourage people to do it. I mean, both my kids popped a 35 on their ACT reading. It helps.
It does.
It helps with. They always read at a very high level, and it started with reading with your kids at night,
Mhm.
and really helping them understand. And what I got bored with occasionally were the books that I would read time and time again. And that's the other thing about reading a kid's book and writing a kid's book. If you do a good job, that book's not getting read once; it's
No.
getting read a whole bunch of times. And if you ever hear a parent tell you they're sick of your kid's book, that's a compliment. Because there's several kids' books that I was sick of, and that's because my kids loved them, and you go back to them. But I also learned to love children's books at that time. I learned to really appreciate the thinking and the nuances that were in the books, and some of the deeper meanings that were expressed in those books. So I started telling stories to my kids, and there's things that I love, and I've studied archaeology most of my life, and also mythology. I've read everything from the Popol Vuh to the Kabbalah to the Argonautica. I've read a lot of mythology is in as close to its original format as I can find. And I love the deeper meaning of mythology and the stories and the education that's buried inside of there. So when I wanted to tell my kids about the night sky, Twinkle became sort of an education device for my kids, especially for my son. He really loved Twinkle. And so we would tell stories of Twinkle's adventures in the night sky, and how he would encounter Hercules and Perseus and Draco the dragon. And there are a lot of Twinkle stories that we told, because the mythology of the night sky, from the planets to the great Japanese cosmology, and to great African myth cycles that focus on the cosmos, Native American. It became a really fun way for me. Give me an excuse to go and read stuff, and then come back and make up a story about it for my son. And so, we did that and had a lot of fun with it. And I guess years later, I sat down and said, it would be really fun if I, essentially codified or wrote down what I told him. And that's kind of where Twinkle came from, and why, when we started telling the story, it focused on certain myths and certain characters in the mythology.
Okay. I want to do a radio identifier for a minute. Okay. So you're listening to Author's Edge with Gael Freer and Bob Price, coming to you weekly on Saturdays at 10 a.m. on KWRH 92.9 and KXOK 102.9 FM, and Monday to Friday, 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. nationwide on My Genre Radio Network. You can also view our latest videos of past shows at authors-edge.com online and download valuable information on marketing and publishing. Now, the thing with this is that there's a special thing about your particular book that you do with your book. So can you explain to us what that is?
Yeah. So again, this comes back to my love of children's books. So Twinkle goes on an adventure. So everybody understands. Twinkle is sitting by the side of a lake and he wants to know who lives in the stars. So there's a universal value of adventure. You know, you want to leave home, you want to explore the world. And he jumps into the stars. And he lands on the moon, and then he jumps to the Pleiades and meets the Seven Sisters, and eventually you've got a good spread there where he, you know, encounters Draco the dragon, and by this point, you know, he's teamed up with Hercules and Perseus, you know, to try to rescue the Princess Andromeda. But what I wanted to do was not just give a great story for kids to read. So as you go through, you can see in the white, you know, you've got the copy that's going through where you're telling the story, and that's what you're reading to the kid. But on the left side, I put some facts about, in this case, Draco the dragon, and it tells both some science and some myth about that. That's not really to read to the kid as you go through the book, but it's to talk to your kid about, and it's for the parents. It's for the parents. So when you get to Draco the dragon, you can read some things about that constellation and a little bit about that, you know, lots of different cultures, lots of people have seen, and Draco's kind of this crazy constellation that kind of scrolls through the night sky, how a lot of cultures have seen a dragon or a snake or a serpent in there. So that's in there. And what I hope will happen is when the parent is reading the book for the 10th time to their kid, they'll get to that point and the kid already knows what's going to happen in the story, and they'll start talking to them about Draco. Hey, did you really understand? Or they'll start talking to them about the Pleiades, you know, of, hey, you know, the real name of the Seven Sisters is the Pleiades. You can only see, you know, 6 of those stars today. And so there's just lots of cool facts and figures. They are presented differently than they usually are, because usually what you see in a kid's book is you see a story and you see all the facts at the back, and there's usually activities and things like that. And we did do some suggestions for activities, but I wanted them in the body. And again, I don't think when you're reading it to the kid, you should go back and read about Draco, but it's there for the parents, and it's there so they can also enjoy a kid's book. So because
and the questions usually come during the time that you're reading the book. If the questions don't come, I mean, by the time you get to the end of the book, the child's already asleep.
With luck. Yeah, right.
Okay?
With luck.
So during the time that you're reading the book is when the child will ask you questions. It's not at the end of the book.
That's right.
So that's really the best place to put questions or to put information is during during the story.
I think so. It's a little different from other books that are out on the market.
I agree.
And you know, and if there's one thing most industries hate, it's originality. So we'll see how people react to it. But it is a different idea and concept. And we've got this great, you know, smaller illustration over there of the constellation that Sam and can we talk about the artwork a little bit?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So let's kind of switch. So the artwork in this is really, I think, absolutely fascinating. So can we see it? Okay. Yeah. All right. So the really super interesting thing that Sam, who I know you're with Sam and Roseanne, you're gonna talk.
Our next show is going to be with Sam and Roseanne, and we'll talk more in depth about it. But I do want the writer to take a look at it.
Yeah. So as you can scroll through some of these different layouts, the one thing that you see is when Twinkle's on Earth. You know, they're very detailed pencil sketching, showing a lot of, you know, great Ozark scenery and flora and fauna. But when he jumps into outer space, they're really amazing fantasy illustrations. So in this particular illustration, this is where he is with Perseus and he's trying to sneak around Draco to actually he's trying to get to Cancer, who is guarding the Princess Andromeda. But what Sam did is she made these amazing pencil sketches. Sam and I are both history bums. So she really, when we think of like Perseus, you can see that he's got his hoplite sandal and his greave in the illustration. And you can see Twinkle going by them. But then she was super inspired by the images from the Hubble and the Webb telescope. And so she created these watercolor backgrounds that are based on the photography of galaxies that are in the right place, by the way. So if we just page forward to Andromeda, you can see Andromeda here, and you can see the Andromeda galaxy behind Andromeda that in the watercolor, and it really makes for a fantastic illustration. So the book really changes tones when Twinkle is in outer space with his imaginary adventure with everybody that's up there. And working with Sam and Roseanne was really gratifying because they had such a great vision after reading the manuscript.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a gorgeous book. There is absolutely no.
We just need it in a bigger format.
We just need it in a bigger format, and that's going to happen. Patience is a virtue, my dear,
Yeah.
And I've told you it's going to happen. All right. I mean, keep in mind, have faith in your publisher.
Yeah, that's right.
She knows what she's doing. Okay. Now you have 2 quotes here. What are the 2? What are you doing here, little mouse? The man asks. I'd like to know who lives in the stars, says Twinkle. Twinkle sees Cancer the crab. The crab has giant claws and does not look nice. Twinkle isn't sure he's brave anymore. What is that?
Well, those are 2 different parts of the book, right? So the first one where they said, "What are you doing here, little mouse?" is when he actually jumps into the stars, and that's when he encounters the man on the moon, and why that's kind of a pivotal quote is that's when your hero accepts his journey, right? He accepts that I'm here for adventure. I'm here to learn and see who lives in the stars. And then the second quote is when he does sneak around Draco and with Perseus and Hercules while they distract the dragon, and he encounters Cancer. And that's when he's scared. That's when Twinkle has to decide whether he's scared or whether he's going to quit or whether he's going to go forward. So, that's a pivotal moment in any book. And that's when our hero decides, I'm going to keep my word and I'm going to go free the princess.
Okay. A children's story depends on illustrations. And as a writer, how do you work with the collaborate? How did working with Roseanne and
so
I mean,
so So again, your listeners will meet them in another episode. But I think the most important thing is when you write something, you always have a vision of what it's going to look like. And as a writer, you have to be willing to surrender that vision to somebody else's artistic interpretation. And I learned that because I worked in media for a lot of years. And when you work with advertisers and you design advertising campaigns, being a little Buddhist about it, you got to let that stuff go, right? I mean, you have to accept that you're working with an illustrator who doesn't see things the way you see. But you also have to have the ability to influence them and move them along, constructively criticize them, make sure you're giving them good feedback. And the thing about Sam and Roseanne is they were completely open to my feedback. They're completely open to my ideas, but I was also open to their interpretation of the manuscript and what they wanted to do. So then it becomes really collaborative, and it becomes fun to get together and say, we can't have Twinkle in this posture. We need to do there. What's he doing when he's right? When he's sitting on the Big Dipper, is he in the right posture? And so does the copy match what's happening there? Does it make sense? And so it was great cooperation, but it is a little bit about giving up the ideas in your own head to make it possible to work with an illustrator.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to go to a commercial break. It's a good time for that. So we'll see you in a few minutes.
El Potro Restaurant and Market, located at 6920 Manchester Avenue, 1 block east of McCausland, offers the finest variety of Mexican and Central American groceries and goods. El Potro restaurant serves authentic Mexican and Central American cuisine, including daily specials, not to mention the best horchata and tastiest margaritas in St. Louis. Open 7 days a week. El Potro, 6920 Manchester Avenue, 1 block east of McCausland.
The United States has a strong tradition of welcoming newcomers and refugees. The Welcome Corps is a new service opportunity for Americans inspired to welcome those seeking freedom and safety and in turn help strengthen their own communities. Welcome Corps is a public-private partnership that is inspired by what Americans represent to so many around the world, a beacon of hope and refuge. All it takes is a helping hand. Are you ready to learn more? Contact the International Institute of St. Louis at info@iistl.org or call 314-773-9090. That's info@iistl.org or call 314-773-9090. In 1857, the Dred Scott decision was a major legal event and catalyst that contributed to the Civil War. The decision declared that Dred Scott could not be free because he was not a citizen. The 14th Amendment, also called the Dred Scott Amendment, granted citizenship to all born or naturalized here in our country and was intended to overturn the U.S. Supreme Court decision on July 9, 1868. The Dred Scott Heritage Foundation is requesting a commemorative stamp to be issued from the U.S. Postal Service to recognize and remember the heritage of this amendment by issuing a stamp with the likeness of the man Dred Scott. But we need your support and the support of thousands of people who would like to see this happen. To achieve this goal, we ask you to download, sign, and share the one-page petition with others. To find the petition, please go to dredscottlives.org and click on the Dred Scott Petition Drive on the right side of the page.
Okay, and we're here talking to E.E. Arundel, which is his pen name, folks. I might just start calling him by his real name. Actually, what does E.E. Arundel mean?
Yeah, so
tell me about that.
So I think the reason why I chose a pen name is just because I do a lot of business, and I'd also like to write some other things that are not for children.
Yeah,
and so
is it spicy things like racy things like
if I write fantasy, Gael, it will not be whips and masks. It will be elves and goblins. So so that's more my. But I think if you're gonna write for children, you have aspirations to maybe write some other things. It's good to use a pen name.
Okay.
Because I would never want to write something else that is more adult enabled content under the same name that might confuse a parent or a child. So I think for me that's important. But the name is an old family name, the Arundel name, and then E.E. or Ernest and Edward, my two grandfathers. So it was definitely.
So I can call you Edward.
I won't answer, but you can.
Okay, so tell me about your writing process. Tell me about you as a writer.
Well, I mean, my writing process is one that I think just continuously goes on in my own head all the time. Maybe sometimes even when it shouldn't be. But I think that's what a lot of people do. That are writers. They kind of live in their own reality at times, which I find completely enjoyable. And so I think the process of writing for me starts out with a bunch of scribbles and a bunch of ideas. And of course, in this particular instance with Twinkle, it started out with telling stories, really stories, that are now, my son just turned 21. So, these stories are now, 17 years old or 18 years old, however old he was when I was originally telling them. So, just writing those down, they're in your head, getting out of your head, getting them down on paper. Your first draft is always written for you, and it sucks. and so you always have to remember that, that you write in a process. And, one thing I learned early in journalism, if you don't enjoy revising and editing, you're probably never going to be a good writer, because you have to constantly revise and edit. And of course, you can do that a little bit easier with a children's manuscript because it is shorter than a full-length manuscript. It takes more time to do it that way. And the other thing I love to do in a writing process is read aloud. And
reading aloud is crucial.
It really helps me with pacing and lots of other things. So.
What's the key to writing good dialogue for children?
Well, there's not tons of dialogue in Twinkle, but when there is dialogue with Twinkle, with kids, you want it to be concise and engaging. In my opinion, the other thing about Twinkle is I made him very respectful, and that is just as a parent, I think there's a lot of really crappy books and cartoons out there that make kids super hyperactive as well. And this is for little kids. So I want the engagement, so, when he meets Orion, he calls him Mr. Orion. And I think that's kind of important when your kid's that small and you're reading to them to get them, because they're at the age where they should still be, hopefully, calling their teachers Mr. and Miss, and other adults that they're around as well.
And you have a real fascination for astrology as well as archaeology.
Yeah, astronomy and astrology.
And
so we can talk about the zodiac all day. So
yeah.
I have a fascination with that as well. But yeah, I mean, I don't claim to be anything other than an armchair warrior when it comes to astronomy, but I am the guy that goes and looks at all the pictures that come in from, as Sam is, looks at all the pictures from the Webb telescope and goes, holy cow, that reads all the articles that come in, and I just love what's out there in the universe. And of course, then I love the interpretation back to what the night sky means to human civilization and what it's taught human civilization. And as I always, like to point out, is we learned math from the stars. And when you think about all the first civilizations that established themselves mathematically, the Sumerians, the Aztecs, it was all that math came from an interpretation of how the stars move across the sky, how the planets are aligned, and things like that. So astronomy is as deep as, and going back as deep as you can in human learning. So, that's what I love. One of the things I love about Twinkle is it is, it's something that's very fundamental. And there's actually a lot of good books out there today about how we've lost the night sky through light pollution and how we don't see that interpretation. So hopefully this book can inspire a few kids to go out, or even some few adults to go find, a dark sky area and talk to their kids about the night sky. It's a great, fundamental human connection.
Yeah. How do you weave your elements of adventure into your tales?
Yeah. Well, kids are not going to be engaged if something fun's not happening. Right. So, I mean, you gotta have something fun. Of course, the plot is simple. And, and for me, every kid looks and says, what's out there? Whether it's in Costco or whether it's, in your backyard, what's out there. And so I think the adventure that is really here is Twinkle saying what's up there and looking around. And then of course, in his imagination, he jumps into the night sky and meets, a variety of different characters, and also learns, and I think this is important when you write something, is learns that everything's not great all the time. And that's part of teaching. And I think it's one of the hardest lessons as we protect and helicopter over our kids is, you get out there into life and get punched in the mouth, and, you want to protect your kid from that.
Right.
And part of that adventure is, landing on Scorpio. And Scorpio being a little grumpy about the fact that he's been landed on, and the mouse having to run away, but wanting to continue on with his adventure, even though he's seen something, that's not very, very happy or friendly.
Why did you pick a mouse?
I
mean, all the little critters out there.
I really don't remember, because again, it came out of storytelling to my son, and I'm not sure why I picked a mouse. He is by a lake, because where I live down in Poplar Bluff in the Ozarks is on a little lake, and so you didn't
pick a frog. You didn't pick. I mean, you picked a mouse, which I happen to like. I think it's absolutely an adorable little guy.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. No, well, I so I didn't go out of my way through some grand thought process on why I picked a mouse, Gael. It could have been a raccoon, but you know, it's but it was a mouse. But I do think that one thing that a mouse a lot through a lot of animation that kids get, you know, I mean, if you think of everything from Mickey Mouse to Tom and Jerry,
True.
Mice have always been a great storytelling tool for kids. And so I think it's a great character. And of course, mice kind of live secret lives too. They kind of come and go. We don't know really what they're doing. They're curious. They get into, unfortunately, a lot of things they shouldn't get into. And so they're also a good, curious, kind of mysterious, cute and adorable little character for kids. So I'm glad I chose a mouse, but yeah, there was
no grand scheme involved there.
Yeah.
No grand scheme, huh?
It's not like I chose the myths and the story were told through a long thought process. The mouse wasn't.
No mouse wasn't.
No, mouse wasn't.
No. Well, you know, I mean, it could have been. You could have had something going on there. Who knows? You know, I mean, I do want to get into a marketing tidbit from Bob, because I mean, Bob isn't here with us today. He's not feeling real well, but I do want to include his little tidbit of marketing. He had something here from Ernest Hemingway's life lesson: wisdom writers often discover too late. So Ernest Hemingway, this is written by Julian Summers. Ernest Hemingway stands tall as one of the most influential literary figures of the 20th century. His succinct yet poetic prose transport readers to scenes of adventure, romance, courage, and loss. However, beyond literature, Hemingway's life offers profound lessons that resonate deeply with modern man. By examining critical chapters of his journey, writers can uncover timeless wisdom to apply to their own lives before it's too late. As a veteran of 2 world wars, an adventure seeker, and eventually Nobel laureate, Hemingway cultivated a deep understanding of masculinity and the human struggle. He dealt with the complex interplay between strength and vulnerability, success and regret. From Parisian cafes to Pamplona bull rings, his experiences forged his philosophies on life, love, fear, and everything. Life lessons from Ernest Hemingway. Appreciate each day, build resilience for hard times. Pursue your passions courageously despite naysayers. Vulnerability requires strength, shed stigmas, and ask for help. Simplicity enables deeper connections and relationships. Challenge comfort zones to evolve perspective and creativity, and focus on living vigorously to avoid regret at life's end. Now, one of the things that little Twinkle does is he's got to be brave. So how do you incorporate the things that we are afraid of in children's stories?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a great question, because there are a lot of children's stories out there where, and I think that's important in a children's story, where something scary or bad happens. And again, you have this instinct as a parent where you want to protect the kid, and maybe you don't necessarily want to see them. So children's stories are actually a good introduction into things don't always go like you want them, and you have to be resilient, and you have to keep your word. So even in a story as short as Twinkle the Star Mouse, there comes a point in the story where Twinkle has to do something that he doesn't want to do. And that moment comes, you know, when he's trying to free the princess. And again, you know, I mean, the cool thing about a lesson like that is, again, it draws on the fundamental mythology that already exists. So Andromeda in mythology was rescued by Perseus from the Kraken, and she's known as the Bound Maiden. She was tied to a rock. So the fact that he is rescuing her in a very, you know, a parallel to the mythology, you know, for people that know that myth, you know, shouldn't be lost on the reader. So when he goes, you know, he's put in a position where he agrees with Hercules and Perseus that he's going to help. And they start fighting the dragon, but he's got to sneak around Cancer the Crab all on his own. And Sam's amazing illustration that I think people get to see of Cancer the Crab is as scary as it needs to be for kids. And you've got Twinkle cowering, you know, being scared in front of Cancer the Crab. The princess is on the other side. If the hero takes no risk and turns back at that point of the journey, nothing's gained. And adventure is lost. And so Twinkle realizes he has, even though he's scared, even though he doesn't want to do it, that he's got to keep his word and he's got to try to rescue the princess. So he's able to sneak around cancer without being seen. And he goes and he chews that rope like a good mouse can. A frog could never have done that, Gael. So he chews the rope and frees the princess. And so, which again, I think the other virtue that is kind of expressed within that is a universal mythologic virtue of helping people who are in need and who are desperate. And so, I think the story of Andromeda, while maybe not making the Disney princess list of a strong female, still evokes an image of a lesson that young boys particularly need to learn, and that is to go out and help people that are in difficult positions and rescue the princess. So as we take rescue the princess lessons out of popular media, it's still a great lesson for boys. And popular media, of course, needs to embrace a diversity of views. And I have another story that was for my daughter, which is an amazing, strong princess story that hopefully I'll get to someday. But I mean, this one is really about that lesson of getting in there and keeping your word and being brave. And that's a great lesson for any kid.
Oh yeah. I think, just standing up to difficult situations.
Absolutely.
And going out and doing the brave thing.
So you do have to think about it. And probably if you sit down and you interpret a lot of the really great children's books that are out there, you'll discover a lot of very deep fundamental things about that story. We just read through it as a story, and sometimes we don't think really about a lot of what's communicated in terms of values within that story. And that's what I loved about taking this story and wrapping it up in other myths, is you just get these very deep virtues that are in there.
Do you suffer from writer's block ever?
Yeah, everybody does. I mean,
so how do you handle that?
By ignoring it. I mean, really, I think everybody, there's a lot of studies now on the value, and I do this in my business life too, when I get burnt out on things, and there's a massive value in doing nothing.
So what do you do when you do nothing?
I'm a hiker. I'm a paddler. I love to work outside. I sit on my butt all day in front of a computer, and that's what I do for a living. So I believe there's a great value in physical labor. So I love to get out and cut things down and mow. And there's a zen in making tall grass short for men, and maybe for women too. So so I mean, so I think that you've got to do those things. And when you get stuck, you just got to walk away. And that's not just that's life advice. I mean, that's not just about writing. I mean, you just
walk away.
You do, and you've got to let your mind go, because you think you overthink things. I mean, in business, people that are in business, we call it paralysis by analysis, and that's it. You're not able to make a business decision because you're spending too long looking at the data. And at some point you go with your guts and you get the work done. And I think writing is kind of like that too. Yeah. There's just a point where you plow through it. And of course, the great thing about modern writing, I don't know how anybody ever wrote on a typewriter. I mean, I started writing, I remember typing in high school, but I don't know. I mean, writing by hand, everything I write is revised 50 times. I mean, I can't imagine, when you read books that, like Jack Kerouac writing out on a long scroll or whatever. I don't know how in the world somebody did that, because I'm like, backspace, delete, cut, copy, paste.
We use whiteout. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, when I used to work in radio, I used to cut tape with a razor blade. I mean, we can talk. There's so there's a lot of advantages being a modern writer. There's no doubt about it, and the way you're able to revise things.
What's your favorite children's story?
My favorite children's story is actually a book called Thank You Bear. And it's a really wonderful little book. And if you would have told me ahead of time, I cannot, Foley is the author. I'm trying to remember his name, but it is a really super simple book, about a bear that finds a box. And when he's got the box, he thinks it's amazing and he wants to show it to everybody. And he goes through meeting a variety of other animals, foxes, elephants, squirrels. and they all tell him what's wrong with his box. It's too small. It's not the right color. I don't have time to talk to you. And then he actually meets a mouse who thinks that the box is just right and the greatest thing in the world. And so
that's where the mouse came from.
Not necessarily, but I, when I think back about reading to my kids, I wore that. There's probably, if I sat down and thought and went through because I kept a library of children's books because I love them so much, and I went through there, I could probably give you a dozen titles that I've read probably, over 50 times. But Thank You, Bear was absolutely worn out by my son, and it's a fantastic book, and it does in a very concise, very simplistic manner, teaches a fabulous lesson, and I think that's what children's books should strive to be. Twinkle's a little more complex than that story is, and I think there's plenty of great, complex books out there that are great children's stories too. The Tomten and the Fox is another one. It's an old story that I really love as well.
What's your favorite myth?
There's a lot of, well, first off, I mean, I think that when you read myths, you start with the history of the Greeks and the deep Greek and then Greco-Roman cycles of mythology. The Odyssey is a book that, absolutely fundamentally hooked me when I was a very young kid reading, young readers' versions of the Odyssey. And so I would have to say that that's probably where I go fundamentally. But then when I was in college, I had an assignment to read the Ramayana, the great Indian epic. And that really changed my view on, because it's an amazing story with Hanuman and Rama. And it fundamentally changed my worldview in a lot of ways of thinking about mythology and looking beyond, what is, the Greco-Roman mythology, which is kind of what makes up the Western canon of thought, which is where I think we all start, at least anybody that grows up here starts, but then getting into, the Irish have an amazing with the Táin and
absolutely,
Cuchulainn and other
but your
myth
favorite,
cycles
the
that are
one
there.
That you like
the Odyssey. I mean, it's the Odyssey that
Odyssey.
I go back to, again and again if I'm gonna have to read something. But there's just a lot of great myth cycles out there, and they all and I really hope to take some of those other myth cycles, especially the night sky mythology, and interpret it with Twinkle. I think Twinkle's got more adventures in him than
you're looking at creating a series about him.
If it's well received, I mean, I approach this creatively, and I'm going to create anyways. I also understand that publishing and making books is a business. So, you got to get out there, and you've got to build something. And, fundamentally when you start out, you've got to make some decisions on what you're going to pay for, what you're not going to pay for, and how you want to do it. And I think a lot of first time authors hope they're going to put together something so great that some big agent's going to show up on your doorstep with a check, and
guess what?
that doesn't happen.
That
doesn't happen. You've got to go out and you've got to work it, and you've got to do some marketing, and you've got to show that you can get projects done, that you've got more than one idea. I think as an author, and just work it, and that's how every industry and every business works. I think any artistic endeavor is more intimidating because you put a little bit of your soul into everything.
It's your baby.
It is. And you put your soul out there, and nobody likes their soul to be criticized and taken a shot at. So, you gotta have your big boy boots on for this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When is Twinkle coming out so that we can all take a look at Amazon and say, "Oh, I know that guy."
I hope in the next couple of weeks. I think if not in the next week. I mean, like a lot of people that are learning things new. Roseanne, when she comes on your show, can say, "Dan keeps telling me to work in different formats because we're trying to write, find the proper format to get the book into."
Okay.
And I do think that that's something that, maybe I could have saved everybody some heartache by learning a little bit more about that in advance. But I think, understanding print on demand, understanding self-publishing, understanding, what a vanity press does, and all these other things that are out there that you can decide whether you want to do it, whether you want, what you don't want to do, and budgeting properly for it. That's the non-fun part of
Yes.
writing a book, but it's a very necessary business part to success. And I'm taking my first steps down that road. So for Twinkle to have more adventures, I got to get my stuff together and
and it's coming.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen.
And focus on that part of the road.
It's gonna happen.
And getting, so making the book that you were showing earlier on KDP on demand. I mean, we thought that was going to be on by now, but we don't like the format. It's too small. And the thing is when you take something in and you've laid it out.
So are you going to put it on KDP on that format?
We haven't decided yet. I think Roseanne's been working on a landscape on a portrait format that's done in the landscape format. But I the illustrations are so great.
They are
that it's insulting to put illustrations like that in a small format. And the other thing is because I made the decision to put the other copy, the educational copy, on the page in which the constellations and the characters are. When you put that in a smaller format, it also crowds up the page a little bit.
It does.
So you've got to put a book like that. So understanding when you're bringing that vision together in design is really important. But I will continue to strive until I find the right format that can get us in on-demand printing, because self-publishing, we have to be on demand. We have to be on KDP.
Right.
That's where the action is happening. That's where the consumers are. And so, we've got to do that. I don't know much yet, but I've learned that. And,
all right.
And,
Okay. So we do have 2 book signings coming up. One is going to be at the Margaret Harwell Museum in Poplar Bluff, Missouri on April 6th from 6 to 8. And we have another one at Poplar Bluff Library on March 16th from 1 to 3. It's both of them in Poplar Bluff, Missouri. And hope to see you. Thank you for tuning in into Author's Edge. Tune in again next week for more tips, resources, and your favorite conversations. Our guests will be Roseanne Stannard and Samantha Clouds, and we will be chatting with you about illustrating Twinkle the Star Mouse. Till then, see you around the inkwell.